When a routine traffic stop spirals into a dangerous confrontation, the unexpected arrival of the county sheriff reveals that true authority isn't measured by the gun you draw, but by the justice you uphold. The afternoon sun beats down on a quiet suburban street. Diana Johnson, a well-dressed black woman in her 30s, stands beside her luxury sedan, which has been pulled over at the curb. Her posture is straight but non-threatening, her hands visible at her sides. 20 feet away, Officer Rebecca Wilson, a white patrol officer with 5 years on the force, stands with her hand resting on her holstered weapon. "I asked for your license and registration," Officer Wilson calls out, her voice carrying a nervous edge. "Why are you out of the vehicle?" Diana keeps her voice steady and calm. "Officer, I was only reaching for my purse when you shouted at me. I thought it would be safer if I stepped out and showed you I'm not a threat." Officer Wilson's hand tightens on her weapon. "That's not standard procedure. Get back in your vehicle now." Her voice cracks slightly, betraying her anxiety. "I'll comply, officer." "I just want to understand why I was pulled over. I wasn't speeding," Diana says, maintaining her composure despite the escalating tension. "The tint on your windows is too dark. It's a violation," Officer Wilson says, pulling her weapon from its holster as Diana makes a small movement. "Hands where I can see them!" Diana freezes, hands rising slowly into the air. "My hands are up, officer. Please, there's no need for your weapon." Officer Wilson's breathing becomes audible, her weapon now pointed at Diana. "Don't move. This is a routine traffic stop, but I need to ensure my safety." "Officer, I understand, but I haven't made any threatening movements," Diana replies, her voice remaining controlled despite the gun aimed at her. "I'm a resident here. I work as a hospital administrator at County General." "I don't care what." "You do. This is about compliance with the law," Officer Wilson says, her posture rigid with tension. "You should know better than to exit your vehicle during a traffic stop." In the distance, the sound of another police vehicle approaching can be heard. Officer Wilson doesn't turn to look, keeping her eyes and weapon trained on Diana. "I apologize if I violated procedure, officer. I genuinely didn't know," Diana says, maintaining her dignified demeanor despite the humiliating situation. "Can we please de-escalate this situation?" A county sheriff's SUV pulls up behind Officer Wilson's patrol car. Sheriff Elena Rodriguez, a veteran law enforcement officer with 20 years of experience, steps out and quickly assesses the situation. Her deputy, Officer Chen, follows her lead but stays back. "Officer Wilson," Sheriff Rodriguez calls out firmly. "What's the situation here?" Officer Wilson startles slightly but doesn't lower her weapon. "Sheriff, I've got a suspect who exited her vehicle during a traffic stop. Potential safety threat." Sheriff Rodriguez walks forward with measured steps. "Lower your weapon, officer. Now." "But Sheriff, protocol states," Officer Wilson begins. "I said lower it," Sheriff Rodriguez interrupts, her tone leaving no room for argument. "I don't see any threat here that warrants deadly force." Officer Wilson hesitates before slowly holstering her weapon, her posture deflating. Sheriff Rodriguez approaches Diana, maintaining a respectful distance. "Ma'am, I apologize for this incident. Are you all right?" "Yes, Sheriff, thank you," Diana replies, slowly lowering her hands. "I believe there's been a misunderstanding about a window tint violation." Sheriff Rodriguez nods. "Officer Wilson, this woman is Dr. Diana Johnson. She's the Chief of Hospital Administration and sits on the County Public Safety Commission." Officer Wilson's face pales visibly. I didn't know, Sheriff." "That shouldn't matter," Sheriff Rodriguez states firmly. "Every citizen deserves the same respect and procedural consideration." She turns back to Diana. "Dr. Johnson, I'll personally handle this matter from here." Officer Wilson steps back, her earlier confidence completely evaporated. "Sheriff, I was just following. We'll discuss this back at the station," Sheriff Rodriguez interrupts. "Deputy Chen will drive your patrol car back. You'll ride with me." The afternoon light had shifted, casting longer shadows across the suburban street as Diana Johnson stood tall, her shoulders squared despite the ordeal she had just endured. The initial shock of having a weapon pointed at her had settled into a composed determination. She had faced discrimination before, subtle glances, unnecessary store security following her, assumptions about her education or position, but having a gun drawn on her during a routine traffic stop had crossed into territory that demanded not just personal resilience, but systemic accountability. "Sheriff Rodriguez, I don't want Officer Wilson to lose her job," Diana said, her voice clear and measured, carrying the authority that came from years of hospital administration and public service. She looked directly at the young officer who now seemed diminished in stature, the earlier bravado replaced by visible discomfort. "But there needs to be accountability. This is exactly the kind of incident our community policing initiative is trying to address." She thought back to the countless committee meetings, the public forums where residents had shared similar stories, the data collection that showed disturbing patterns in traffic stops. Diana had devoted hundreds of volunteer hours to the county's policing reform efforts, believing that structural change was possible, that bias-informed policing wasn't inevitable. Now, the very issues she had discussed in conference rooms had played out in her own life, on her own street, just blocks from her home. Sheriff Rodriguez nodded solemnly, her weathered face reflecting years of witnessing the complicated dynamics between law enforcement and the communities they served. Unlike Officer Wilson, Rodriguez carried her authority with quiet confidence rather than nervous aggression. Her 20 years on the force had taught her that respect garnered more compliance than fear, that community trust was the true currency of effective policing. "I agree completely, Dr. Johnson," the sheriff replied, her tone professional but empathetic. "This will be addressed through proper channels, including our newly established civilian review process that you helped create." She glanced meaningfully at Officer Wilson, whose eyes darted between the two women. "Transparency in these matters is non-negotiable if we're serious about rebuilding community trust." Officer Wilson shifted her weight from one foot to another, the realization of her error setting in not just as a procedural misstep, but as part of a larger pattern that reflected poorly on the department. Her training had emphasized threat, assessment, but somewhere along the way, implicit biases had clouded her judgment of what constituted a threat. A luxury vehicle in this neighborhood, a confident black woman who knew her rights, these had somehow registered as danger signals in Wilson's threat matrix. "Dr. Johnson, I'm sorry," Officer Wilson finally said, her earlier authoritative tone replaced by genuine contrition. "I misread the situation." The words felt inadequate even as they left her mouth, unable to capture the gravity of pointing a weapon at an innocent civilian. Diana regarded the officer carefully, noting the flush of embarrassment creeping up her neck, the way her eyes couldn't quite maintain contact. There was humility there now, but Diana had seen too many incidents resolved with apologies that led nowhere, promises of change that evaporated once the immediate crisis passed. Real transformation required more than momentary remorse. "Apologies are just the beginning, Officer Wilson," Diana replied evenly, her voice neither accusatory nor condescending, but firm with conviction. "Real change comes through education and a willingness to examine our own biases. I hope you'll take this opportunity to reflect on why you perceived such threat in my actions when there was none." Deputy Chen, who had maintained a professional distance during the exchange, approached Officer Wilson with an outstretched hand, silently requesting her patrol car keys. The young officer surrendered them without protest, a small gesture that acknowledged her diminished authority in this situation. Chen nodded respectfully to Diana before walking toward Wilson's vehicle, his straight-backed posture contrasting with Wilson's now slumped shoulders. Sheriff Rodriguez adjusted her badge, which caught the late afternoon sunlight. "Dr. Johnson, you're free to go. We'll follow up regarding this incident through official channels." She handed Diana a business card. "My direct line is on the back. I know you're familiar with our department's leadership, but I want to ensure you have immediate access should you need anything related to this incident." Diana accepted the card with a nod, appreciating the gesture while understanding its subtext. The sheriff was acknowledging the seriousness of what had occurred while also subtly indicating her own accountability in the follow-up process. It was the kind of procedural respect that should be standard but too often wasn't, especially for people who looked like her. "Thank you, Sheriff. I'll be following up with a formal statement tomorrow," Diana replied, already mentally composing. The detailed account she would provide. Documentation mattered in these cases, not just for her own incident, but for establishing patterns that could lead to policy changes. "I'd also like to request the body camera footage be preserved." Sheriff Rodriguez nodded without hesitation. "Already done. I radioed in the preservation request as soon as I arrived on scene." She glanced at Officer Wilson. Standard procedure in any incident involving a drawn weapon. Wilson looked surprised at this information, perhaps only now realizing that her actions would be reviewed not just through verbal accounts, but through the unblinking eye of her own equipment. The body camera footage would show her escalation, her decision to draw her weapon on an unarmed civilian who had shown no aggression. There would be no way to reframe the narrative when faced with such objective evidence. "I'll also be requesting the dashboard camera footage from both vehicles," Diana added, her professional experience with documentation and evidence preservation coming to the fore. "And I'd like confirmation numbers for all preserved recordings." Sheriff Rodriguez pulled out her department-issued tablet and quickly noted these requests. "I'll have those confirmation numbers emailed to you within the hour, Dr. Johnson." She paused, choosing her next words carefully. "While I can't prejudge the outcome of any review process, I want you to know that what happened here today falls short of the standards I expect from every officer under my supervision." The acknowledgement hung in the air between them, not quite an admission of departmental failure, but a recognition that this incident reflected deeper issues that couldn't be attributed solely to one officer's poor judgment. Diana appreciated the sheriff's careful navigation of her dual responsibilities. To support her officers while holding them accountable, to acknowledge systemic problems without making promises she couldn't keep. Officer Wilson seemed to shrink. Further under the weight of this exchange, her earlier authoritativeness completely evaporated. The gun that had given her such confidence now seemed like a burden at her hip. "Should I?" she began uncertainly, gesturing vaguely toward Diana's vehicle. "The traffic stop. The window tint violation." Sheriff Rodriguez cut her off with a subtle shake of her head. "That matter is concluded. I see no violation that warrants further action." Her tone made it clear that pursuing the alleged infraction now would only compound the inappropriate handling of the situation. Diana reached into her purse, slowly, deliberately, the learned caution of someone who understood that sudden movements could be misinterpreted, and retrieved her business card. She extended it toward Officer Wilson, who hesitated before accepting it. "The hospital runs a community engagement program for first responders," Diana explained, maintaining her professional demeanor. "Part of it includes training on de-escalation, techniques, and bias recognition. The next session starts in 2 weeks. I think you might find it valuable." Officer Wilson looked down at the card, turning it over in her fingers before carefully placing it in her breast pocket. "Thank you," she said quietly, the words conveying more than mere politeness. Perhaps the first genuine step toward reflection. Sheriff Rodriguez turned to Officer Wilson, her expression firm but not unkind. "Officer, with me. We have much to discuss about proper escalation protocols and community relations." She placed a hand on Wilson's shoulder, guiding her toward the sheriff's vehicle. "Deputy Chen will handle your patrol car." As they walked away, Diana could hear the sheriff speaking in low tones to Wilson, the words not meant for her ears, but the seriousness of the conversation evident in the sheriff's posture. This wasn't just a reprimand, it was the beginning of a necessary recalibration, a chance for an officer to either grow from her mistakes or reveal herself as unsuited for the responsibilities of the badge. Diana returned to her car, aware that neighbors had watched the scene unfold from windows and porches. Some had smartphones raised, recording the encounter, a modern reflex born from too many incidents where documentation had made the difference between justice and its absence. She gave a small nod of acknowledgement to them, a silent thank you for bearing witness. As she settled into the driver's seat, Diana took a moment to process what had happened. Her hands trembled slightly, the delayed physical reaction to danger now that the immediate threat had passed. She allowed herself this moment of vulnerability in the privacy of her vehicle, breathing deeply to steady herself before starting the engine. In her rearview mirror, she could see Sheriff Rodriguez opening the door of her SUV for Officer Wilson, the hierarchy between them visible in every movement. The lesson was clear, and would hopefully endure beyond this afternoon. Authority comes with responsibility, and justice must be applied equally to all. The true measure of power wasn't in the weapon one carried, but in the wisdom with which one wielded, or chose not to wield, that power. As Diana pulled away from the curb, she made a mental note to call the Community Policing Committee chair tonight. Tomorrow's scheduled discussion on traffic stop protocols had just become significantly more urgent and personal. Change might come slowly, but incidents like today's, properly documented, respectfully addressed, and followed through with meaningful action, were the necessary catalysts for that change. In her hospital administrative role, Diana had often said that systems only improved when they acknowledged their failures. Now she would ensure that this principle applied equally to the systems meant to protect and serve her community.